1. Chapter 31, Ascension. Ascension is the process whereby a person leaves his or her body and unites the mind with the minds of the elders of his or her tribe. In our natural ancient world, before the appearance of the non-Black races, all people died consciously. When they had completed all 7 great rituals of the Black nation, they soon thereafter decided it was time to ascend to eternity. They simply laid down their bodies while perfectly conscious. Their mind expanded until it united with the minds of the 2 elders of their tribe. At the instant of unity, the magnetic connection, or the so-called spiritual cord that linked them to the physical body, is severed automatically, and the body is permanently abandoned and left to be buried by family and friends. Today, people ascend the same way, but they do so unconsciously. Moreover, they die not of their own choosing, but either by accident, disease, or other causes. Thus, today, a person can die at any age, according to the circumstances of his or her life, whereas in ancient days, every person died only at old age, after completing the 7 great rituals. The great rituals, along with the major and minor ones they engaged in during their 7,000 years of life, developed their souls to the point where they became one with God. They reached a state of being where they became equal to the 24 elders in knowledge, lacking equality with them only in wisdom. The 24 elders exceeded all people in wisdom because of their age. The youngest couple of the elders are about 25,000 years old, and the oldest over 700,000 years old. They have long since completed the great rituals and have been living consciously in a state of divine unity. Thus, they have accumulated more life experience than all other people, and life experience is turned into wisdom by the knowledge and application of truth. So even though the senior citizens, 7,000 years or older, who ascended to eternity in the minds of the 24 elders, have accumulated all the knowledge possible while living on earth, they do not have as much wisdom as the elders due to being younger. But the perfection of their knowledge is equal to that of the elders, whereby they are equal to God in knowledge. Thus, when they ascend as full gods in knowledge, lacking only in experience and wisdom. In the modern age, people still ascend into the minds of the 24 elders, but they do not consciously unite with them as they did in ancient days. The reason is because individuals are no longer taught and trained by the ritual methods of ancient days. Thus, people today die before gaining enough knowledge and truth to make them full gods. As a result of this lack of knowledge, this ignorance or self-forgetfulness, they are unable to consciously unite with the elders of their tribe. As I've mentioned before, every person has an unconscious mind as well as a conscious mind. The unconscious mind is the eternal part of the person, the original self and creator of the universe, one of the 1,000,000,008,000,000 gods. The conscious mind of the person, on the other hand, is what makes the individual's personality and is always made brand new in every life, whereas the unconscious mind is the same eternal, unchanging godly aspect of the person. When a person ascends today, only the unconscious mind, the God in him or her, unites with the elders. The individual personality, on the other hand, goes to a different place in heaven, where his or her life continues in a different state. When the non-Black races die, they are also separated, i.e., the conscious personality is separated from the unconscious mind. Now, the unconscious mind of all the non-Blacks belong to the God Yahweh. When Yahweh, also known as Yaqub, created the non-Blacks 6,000 years ago, he gave them a collective unconscious from part of his own mind. Every person that lives must have both a conscious mind as well as an unconscious mind, which acts as a true guide in the person's life. No person that is called human can exist as a purely new personality without the presence of this inner guide, or what modern people call conscience. This does not necessarily mean the person will listen to his or her inner guide, as each person has complete free will. But the inner guide always suggests advice to the person's conscious mind to either be accepted or rejected according to the person's nature and inclinations. In the case of Black people, the inner guide is a particular God, one of the 1,000,000,008,000,000 original gods, because Black people are eternal, having no beginning, and so provide their own inner guide. In the case of the non-Blacks, their inner guide is Yahweh, or one of the 60,000 Elohim with whom he created the non-Black races in our image. In order to guide these new people, they gave part of their mind to them to become their collective unconscious. Thus, when a non-Black person dies, his or her unconscious mind ascends back into the mind of the God Yahweh, whose mind is united with the minds of the Elohim. Their conscious individual minds go to the same place called heaven, where all Black people go today. Therefore, in this present cycle, we live in a time where there is no longer conscious ascension of Black people into eternity. Such conscious ascension will resume at the end of this age, when all the non-Blacks that can be saved will be saved. They will ascend to a special heaven where they will continue to be trained in order to remove most of their imperfections that have led them to a sinful existence. Now, these heavens that individuals go to in this age are also in the minds of the elders. The minds of the elders are an expansive, infinite state of being consisting of an infinite number of levels of existence. These levels of existence are brought into reality as needed to accommodate the states of the minds of the people who die and ascend to them. There are many levels of existence in the elders' minds that are brand new. These new levels were brought into existence by necessity due to the existence of the non-Blacks, who are a new form of people that never existed before. This type of person lives, by and large, contrary to nature. Therefore, they necessarily have a short life. They cannot be initiated into the 7 great rituals, which require a much longer lifespan. The great rituals guarantee the perfection of a person's character while still living on earth. They are a powerful means of personality transformation. They require a continuous lifespan of at least 7,000 years in a physical body for a person to be initiated into all of them while living on earth. No person can be initiated into more than one great ritual every 1,000 years. There is no physical body that can withstand the ecstasy of eternity more than every 1,000 years. In order to make the non-Blacks, Black people first had to shorten their own lifespan before they could give birth to new individuals who live a shorter life. This was decided at the time of the making of the non-Black races that all those gods who so choose would join the world of Yaqub and the non-Black races by sharing their shortened lifespan and the subsequent self-forgetfulness. This was seen as the most efficient way to gain the full experience of their world. The gods did so fearlessly, even though they anticipated a world full of sin and error. To them, the experience and all that would be gained from it in terms of wisdom was worth all the anticipated suffering. Hence, we are in a situation today where Black people no longer ascend consciously to eternity. Also, when we die and ascend, we are sent to a place in heaven where we can continue to gain knowledge to complete what we would not be taught here on earth due to the absence of ancient rites of passage. Thus, in the elders' heaven, there are many levels that people occupy according to their state of ignorance or wisdom at the time of death. In short, then, there are 2 types of ascension. One is conscious ascension, as it was in ancient days before the appearance of the non-Black races. In this type of natural life, every individual born on earth was educated using the various forms of initiation, climaxing in the 7 great rituals. At the end of our life, our conscious and unconscious minds became one, and the person became full God. He or she was then equal to the elders in every way, except in longevity of experience or wisdom. So then in ancient days, people died by consciously laying down their bodies and uniting with the elders in eternity. Their individual personality formed in that life continues to exist until the end of the universe. Their original self, on the other hand, would incarnate again and again, forming new personalities in each life, even as we continue to do today. The ascendant individual personalities that remain in eternity until the end of the universe have an opportunity to gain more universal experience and increase in wisdom. Being in an eternal state, they're no longer bound by time and space. They move freely in every part of the universe. even in other universes and heavenly realms. That is the ancient form of ascension. The modern form is different and adjusted to today's condition of self-forgetfulness. To summarize, when a person dies, either a Black person or non-Black, he or she cannot unite with his or her unconscious mind, called the mind of God in Black people and the mind of Yahweh in non-Blacks, who also call it their collective unconscious. This unconscious part of the non-Blacks is reunited with its origin, which is the mind of Yahweh and the Elohim. It takes with it all that is of value in terms of goodness and truth, which is usually not much, from the life of that non-Black. The person himself or herself is directed by his or her inner nature to one of the levels of heaven prepared for them by the elders. Now, the existence of personalities in these levels of heaven is not a material or physical existence such as we have on earth. It's a type of existence somewhat like in a dream world. The person gains a body just like he or she had on earth, but his body has no weight. It is made stable not by its own weight, as is the case on earth, but entirely by thought. It can move about without effort, exactly the same way you move your dream body. Moreover, it can be improved as a person's character improves and made glorious without end, if the person chooses everlasting life. Everything in that realm is made of mental substance, exactly the same substance used to make your dream world. The only difference between that reality and the dream world is that those heavenly worlds are more coherent. They are as permanent as the earth and do not fluctuate like the worlds of dreams or fantasy. Other than that, they are like the dream world in that everything in them is created directly by using the mind, without having to condense it into physical substance slowly over trillions of years, as is the case in the physical universe. That is the reason objects there do not have weight and can be created almost instantly, and people can move about at will without effort. There are as many of those heavenly worlds as there are types of people separated according to their different natures, from the lowest and most evil to the most elevated, loving, and kind. Each person becomes part of a community of people of the same nature as his. This is a natural way of dividing people because people of like mind and character are naturally attracted together. The purpose of dividing the non-Black races into different levels of goodness in those heavens is so that those who are inclined to goodness can have the opportunity to be saved. When Yaqub made the non-Black races, he knew that their bodies, as a new physical species, would only last for 7,000 years maximum. The first 6,000 years of their existence, they would rule the world according to their nature, which is inclined more to evil than good. During the last 1,000 years of their 7,000-year existence on Earth, they would be given the opportunity to undo all the evil they did. This coming 1,000 years will thus see the application of justice in the form of punishment for all the sins committed by them and their ancestors. Every wrong committed by them or their ancestors will be righted by them. Many will suffer horribly and perish as a result of the coming application of justice, but some will survive and eventually repent. After that 1,000-year period, around the year 3000 AD, they will all cease to exist as a physical species. Those individuals among them who have any chance of being reformed will be reformed if they so choose. They will ascend to the higher heavenly spheres. Their reformation, once started in the heavenly realms, will continue forever if they so choose. The reformation of the non-Black races is an effort to make them perfect like eternal beings. But because the races are not eternal from the past, they cannot reach the full and complete perfection of eternal gods. Therefore, their spiritual improvement will continue forever. For them, this is an ideal form of heavenly existence, where they will continue to improve without end. It is a form of one-sided eternalness called everlasting life, about which the more enlightened among them have preached over the ages. It's one-sided in that they will be eternal into the future without being eternal from the past. The difference between eternalness and everlastingness is that to be truly eternal a being has to be eternal from the past, meaning to be without beginning. A person who has a beginning and cannot unite with his or her eternal self can continue to live forever as long as he or she continues to improve in goodness and truth. Such improvement is unlimited because God's perfection, which is their goal, is unlimited. Then such a person has everlasting life, dependent upon the condition that he never regresses back into evil, but always improves in character. Under that condition, such a person will live forever in heaven. On earth and in the rest of the universe, matters are entirely different. The universe is a place where all new life first comes into being, created by those with eternal life in them. The only people that can continue to live forever in the universe as physical beings are those that have self-generated eternal life in themselves, having no beginning. Eternity is synonymous with goodness. If it were not so, eternal beings would have self-destructed long ago, because evil naturally leads to self-destruction. Thus, any people that are made by removing goodness from them, in the way the non-Black races were made, cannot have an everlasting physical life in the universe. Their lack of goodness or self-generation guarantees that they will self-destruct. The non-Black races were not made to be permanent residents of the earth. Like many species that have come and gone, they too are destined to disappear. The purpose for their creation is for the manifestation and experience of that part of God commonly called evil, but better called self-forgetfulness. Once all the gods have gained this experience, then the species used to manifest it is no longer needed in the universe. Once the species of life has served its purpose, it disappears from the earth like any other species. The only difference between animal species and the non-Black races is that they have individual personalities, or what is called a soul. But unlike Black people, they do not have self-generation. Individual personalities have the capacity for self-knowledge, a quality that animals and plants do not have. Because of this quality, there is naturally the opportunity for self-improvement directed by the individual's will. Other life forms do not have this quality of self-will. Therefore, when the earthly purpose of these other life forms is fulfilled, they cannot perpetuate their own existence in another state by the power of self-will as people can. As stated before, the non-Black races do not have the power to perpetuate their physical existence forever. They have tried other methods to extend the life of their species. They started about 4,000 years ago to genetically produce new races. They combine their own procreative genes with the hardy and more enduring genes of certain insects, reptiles, and mammals to engineer new races out of themselves. Many of their genetic experiments were unsuccessful, and the leftover products, those that survived, became abnormal monsters and beasts, some of them which still exist to this day. But with the help of the Elohim, they finally became successful and created 3 basic new types of races. These new races were highly intelligent. They soon gained their independence from their genetic engineers and were helped by the Elohim to leave the earth. They settled in different parts of our galaxy and became what are called extraterrestrials. They were created in 3 basic forms: human-looking, just like Earth humans, reptilian-looking, and insect-like creatures. The first type, the mammalian human-looking genetic products, are the most popularly seen types of extraterrestrials and have been reported to look like either blonde Caucasian or dark-haired Asian humans. The reptilians also look human, but have scaly skin, like snakes and lizards. The insectoid beings are mostly what are called grays, who look somewhat like human-sized ants on 2 legs. These 3 races originated from Earth as a product of genetic engineering by the light races, with the help of the Elohim, which took place about 4,000 years ago. The genetically engineered races have since colonized many planets in our galaxy. They have not only increased their populations, but they themselves have also genetically engineered many different types of new humanoid beings from their own genes in combination with other life forms, both animals and plants. As a result, Our galaxy is teeming with multitudes of humanoid beings. Many of them are self-conscious humans, whereas others are non-self-conscious and function as biological robots. At this point in time, as we reach the end of this present cycle, those genetically engineered humans have come up against a difficult problem. They are unable to prolong their physical existence by ordinary sexual procreation. The conditions under which they were engineered were such that they came from a severely limited genetic pool. The foundation of their genetic structure is based on the biology of the non-Black races, who themselves are a genetically limited species because of the way they were made. The extraterrestrial races thus need a frequent infusion of fresh genetic material from the non-Black races, as well from animals and plants to bolster their genetic pool. Therefore, they have come back to Earth in large numbers and are presently involved in a gigantic project of collecting genetic material from the non-Black races, and even from Black people wherever they can. But because the non-Black races are themselves a dying species, all the work of artificial insemination, hybridization, cloning, and so on can only extend the physical bodies of these races for a short time. 1,000 more years at the most for the entire species. They too will perish like the non-Black races at the end of the coming 1,000 years. Those among them who choose everlasting life will also ascend into the heavens of Yahweh, along with the non-Black races. The races, terrestrial and extraterrestrial, do not have the power to perpetuate their physical existence forever, as stated. All these races have the opportunity for continued everlasting life in heaven by retaining the awareness and memory of their existence. This is called self-consciousness. Now, self-consciousness can be made everlasting if the individual sustains it with truth and goodness. The same self-consciousness can be destroyed if the individual willingly rejects the truth and dwells in ignorance and evil. All self-conscious existence lives for the purpose of attaining the goodness of God. And God is eternal life, meaning that goodness and eternity are two sides of the same coin. Any person who rejects goodness is automatically choosing self-destruction. According to the laws of nature set down by the original 1,000,000,008,000,000 gods, every such person has exactly 7,000 years as an individual or as a race to choose either everlasting life or cessation of existence. Thus, it will happen in the coming 1,000 years, which is the final part of the 7,000-year existence of the non-Black races, that all of them will get to the heavenly realms where they will either choose life to live forever or cease to exist. In the mental or heavenly realms, a person's true nature cannot be hidden inside the body the way it can on earth. Thus, every individual's true nature is revealed there. So every one of them will have the choice to either follow their evil nature as they did on earth, or to repent and seek everlasting life. Now, just as Black people are present on earth among the non-Black races, so they will be present in their heavens as well to complete the experience. Just as we witnessed and experienced the manifestation of evil on earth, so will we witness and experience the reformation of those few among the races who will choose everlasting life. Many of them have so succumbed to their evil natures that it will be impossible for them to repent. And so they will die the second and final death, which is cessation of existence. But even among those who perish, whatever little is of value in their corrupted lives will be taken from them before they finally cease to exist, and will become the property of all Black people, to be kept in the custody of their Maker for the benefit of all posterity. The rest, who choose everlasting life, will live under the guidance and benevolence of their God and Maker, Yahweh. He will be their God, and they will be his people forever and ever. Black people who were born in the last 6,000 years also need to complete the 7 great rituals of the Black nation, as well as the other minor and major rites leading to the 7. They'll have this opportunity after they ascend into the elders' special heavens. Once there, they'll begin a ritual education suited to their state of mind. The forms of these rights will be suitable to the culture of each group or community. The forms of all the rites of passage change all the time according to the circumstances, except the 7 great rituals. The 7 are always led by the elders and remain the same everywhere. But the other major and minor rites change according to the designs of the leaders and their people. The rites as they are practiced in Africa today would be unsuitable for African Americans, African British, Jamaicans, and the rest of the diasporians. They all have a present culture that is different than that of Africans in many respects. For example, in Africa, we still have poets called griots who recite history and stories in a certain way. Here in the United States and other non-Black countries, Black people have created a modified form of griotship in the art of rap music. Much of rap music is contaminated by the destructive tendencies of some rappers to emulate the perversions and overly materialistic lifestyles of the non-Black races. But there is nevertheless a small but potent segment of it dedicated to storytelling in the old style of African griotship. That is especially the case among those rappers allied with the teachings of the 5% nation of gods and earths, and other offshoots of the teachings of Elijah Muhammad. Their music represents an example of ancient African teaching tool modified to suit modern times and a different culture. So too will the ritual education of each group of Black people be modified to conform to their cultural spirit. In these new heavens, no people are thrust into a strange culture in which they will be made uncomfortable. Thus, the divisions in the heavenly realm take into account not only the mental differences between people, but also regional differences, as well as those of historical eras. Only at the end, when the people's education climaxes in one of the great rituals, will they come together and share the experience as one. The 7 great rituals by nature reconcile all differences of space and time. So each group or community will go from lesson to lesson according to how it suits their background. As Black people progress with their education in the special heavens, they will increase in knowledge and wisdom. Their bodies will become progressively glorified by the power of their own will to reflect their wisdom, until they reach the same level of glory as the ancients. All their ritual education will be completed in the next 1,000 years, instead of taking 7,000 years, as is the case on earth. This is possible because in the heavenly state, people are outside the bounds of time and space. Their progress is totally self-directed, meaning that time for them unfolds at a pace set by them, not by planetary orbits, as is the case in the physical universe. After 1,000 years have passed on Earth, all the Black people ever born on Earth will have completed the 7 great rituals. There will be a great celebration in heaven at that time. All the people will unite with their original self and become full God. Their dependence on Yahweh's world and heavens will then come to an end. They will be full God, like all our ancestors who ascended consciously from Earth before the advent of the non-Black races. As soon as they attain full godhood, they will gain the power to leave the special heavens of Yahweh. They will join all the ancestors that have ascended in the past, since the beginning of the universe, who live in the original eternal heavens of the 24 elders. After 1,000 years, the special heavens of Yahweh will be permanently inhabited only by the non-Blacks. All the Black people that were initiated in them in this 6,000-year cycle will be able to come and go in them as they please, as will other Black people from the past or future who have an interest in seeing the progress of Yahweh's creatures. The new heavens of the non-Blacks exist in Yaqub's mind, as already stated, but that part of his mind dedicated to them is held in the custody of the 24 elders, who are the custodians of every type of mind unity. The fact that they exist in Yahweh's mind means that the non-Blacks can never leave those heavens. Their entire future existence is restricted to these realms. To Black people who are outside these realms and are free to come and go in them as they please, This may seem like a severe restriction, but to the inhabitants themselves, the non-Blacks, this is not a real restriction because the expansion of each heaven is unlimited. Not only that, but the number of levels that they can ascend to is also unlimited. Mathematically speaking, the part of Yahweh's mind in which the new heavens exist is an infinity within a larger infinity. Yahweh, as one of the 1,000,000,008,000,000 gods, is an infinite being, as are all the other gods. Therefore, the expansion of his mind cannot be limited. And so the expansion of part of his mind cannot be limited either. The mind, even though it is one, can be divided into an infinite number of parts, as is clear from the fact that new people are born every day on earth, each one with his or her own mind. Yahweh's creation of an entirely new realm of existence is an example of God's creative ability common to all the 1,000,000,008,000,000 gods. This is not the first time such a creation has come into being. It is the first of its kind, but every god has his or her own creations. There are many such realms of existence created by other gods individually or in collaboration with others, as Yahweh has done in this case. There are individual creations that all the 1,000,008,000,000 gods produce, aside from the creation of the physical universe, which is produced by all of them together. The original people, in addition to creating collectively, also have an endless number of individual and group creations that they have been creating since the beginning of eternity that has no beginning. Yahweh's creation is unique only in the sense that it is the only one where God manifests what has been hidden as evil in him or her until now. But it is not unique in terms of being an individual creation of a particular God or group of gods. Every one of the 1,000,008,000,000 gods has produced unique individual creations before, and not once, but countless trillions of times. These creations still exist in the minds of their creators and will continue to exist forever, as will Yahweh's creation. The living creatures that inhabit these creations worship their maker as their God. In the same way, all the non-Black people who worship Yahweh as their God will worship Yahweh as their God as soon as they discover the truth. Ultimately, the fact of the matter is that he brought them into existence and will give them everlasting life, only to those among them who will accept it. Reverence for him, when the time comes, will be nothing more than a natural reaction of their soon-to-be enlightened minds, to show their inexpressible gratitude to their maker for making them. In the same way, do all the creatures of the other gods show their appreciation through worship. Now, many Black people born in this age of Yahweh will also worship him when he and the 60,000 Elohim come back to earth. They will rule the earth in peace for a period of 1,000 years. When Yahweh makes his majestic physical appearance on earth and makes himself known as its maker, all God-fearing people, including many Black people, will fall to their knees in grateful worship of him. That is natural for persons who have come into being in the way that we and all the non-Blacks have been brought into being in this 6,000-year cycle. But there will come a time at the end of the coming 1,000 years of peace under Yahweh's rule when all Black people will complete their initiation, both those in heaven and on earth. They will unite with their original self and then know Yahweh, their God, as their brother, one whom they have known and loved since eternity. They will stop worshiping him at that time, not out of spite or disrespect, but as a result of knowing the true facts of their situation. Thus, at the end of the coming 1,000-year period, only Yahweh's creatures, the non-Black races here on earth and extraterrestrial, will be left as the permanent inhabitants of his heavenly realms. They will continue to love and worship their God Yahweh forever, even as they grow in goodness and perfection in an attempt to be like him and his soulmate, and also to be like his brothers and sisters, the Elohim. Non-Blacks are our images. There are many subtle differences between beings and living images of beings. One such difference concerning this aspect of ascension is in the way ascended Blacks and non-Blacks gain their glorious bodies in heaven. Of all the differences between a being and his or her image, the most important is this: real beings, Black people, attain full godhood after 7,000 years. Those created as images of real beings go on an everlasting spiritual evolution, increasing in perfection forever and ever, but never reaching absolute perfection, which is possible only in the state of divine unity. That is the fundamental difference between God and his or her creations. The difference plays a part in heaven when Blacks and non-Blacks increase in glory due to increasing knowledge and wisdom. The body of a non-Black reaches stages of glory conforming to his spiritual development, meaning the improvement of his moral character. As he improves to a certain point, he is able to ascend to the next level of heaven, and the higher glory of that level is reflected in the increased glory of his body. He lives in that level for an age and continues to improve until he has learned all that is available there before ascending to the next level. He cannot live in any of the higher heavens as a permanent resident until he has spiritually evolved to that level. When he does, his body gains more in glory, and he ascends again. This goes on forever without end. That is the situation for non-Blacks. In the case of Black people, our spiritual evolution does not come in endless steps. It reaches a climax when we permanently unite with our first self and become full God. As soon as the unity takes place, all the levels of all the heavens ever created open up for us, including the most recent heavens, those of Yahweh, where the non-Blacks are to be found. Thus, when a Black person reaches divine unity after the completion of the 7 great rituals, he or she gains the power to access all the heavens in existence in their infinitude. Perfected gods have the power to create a body for themselves with which they can inhabit any of the heavens in existence, and there is no end to their number. So the difference then is that people who progress in stages gain a glorified body corresponding to the level of their spiritual development and are detained in that level until they gain more knowledge, wisdom, and perfection to ascend further. Those who have attained divine unity create a body for themselves according to which level of heaven they desire to visit. That is one subtle difference between a creator and an image. I'll mention others in their proper context in future discussions. This series of lessons has hopefully provided a brief but clear explanation of today's modified form of ascension, which gave rise to all the special heavens of Yahweh. Like every past creature of every God, these new realms of existence will continue forever, because what God creates can never be destroyed. In conclusion, I'll say the following: God is perfect and good. He or she has been so ever since eternity and has never known other than complete perfection. Thanks to Yaqub's idea, a creation has been brought about wherein God can experience other than that goodness, commonly called evil. In addition, God will experience what it's like to seek perfection and never find it in an absolute form. The non-Black races are part of Yaqub or Yahweh's mind and are his personalities. Even though they are independent free will beings, they are nonetheless the manifestation of Yaqub. He lives in them as their mind of God or divine spirit that will indwell every one of them who chooses everlasting life. Their experiences as evil beings in the past 6,000 years will become Yaqub's experiences. Because of the divine unity of Black people, they will become the experiences of all Black people as well. Their coming spiritual progress in search of perfection will also become our experiences. God, who is eternally perfect and has known none other than absolute perfection, has created images of himself or herself through which he or she can experience the absence of absolute perfection. All things are in God, both in their eternal perfect nature as well as their opposites. It is God's intent today, as it has been throughout all time, to experience all that is in him or her. Those opposite qualities that God cannot experience directly as a perfect being, he or she will find a way to experience by creating beings in an image suitable for their manifestation. Some of these qualities have a limited cycle of time, such as evil or self-forgetfulness, which cannot last for longer than 6,000 years. But some of the opposite qualities can continue forever, as will be the case with the pursuit of God's absolute perfection by the non-Black races. Next, I intend to start a series of discussions on the true Israelites, the chosen people of Yahweh.
Because of the effort you have put into this thread, take what I write in good heart. Is there anything in antiquity that backs up what you have taken time to put in this form?
If you mean anything in the way of physical evidence, yes, there is. The most absolute evidence is to be found only in the secret teachings of some African tribes of today. But there is plenty of physical evidence left in the cultures of ancient Sumer, India, and Egypt. When read and interpreted correctly, the tomb writings of ancient Egypt talk very clearly about ascension and resurrection. There are some Egyptologists who are aware, for instance, that the Great Pyramids were used as ascension or resurrection machines. But many of them interpret this truth as if it's just allegory instead of fact. They suspect that the ancient pharaohs had burial rites performed inside of the Great Pyramids, but make the mistake of expecting to find their bodies in there. The chambers of the pyramids were indeed used for ascension, but the bodies were always removed after the soul ascended and buried in a proper underground tomb. You'll also find information where the Egyptians expected the soul of the king to ascend to the star Sirius, and the pyramids, in fact, have chambers aligned to that star. Such ascension to Sirius did take place at a certain point, and I'll discuss it later. If one is not in a position to directly study the tomb drawings and papyri of the ancients, then one has to learn to read between the lines of the writings of modern Egyptologists, Sumerologists, and the like, because they attempt to explain matters in which they are not properly initiated and hence confuse many clear facts.
Quote, our Earth and solar system were created 78 trillion years ago. As soon as the Earth was ready, 144,000 ancestors came from another star system, the star called Sirius that was worshipped by the ancient Egyptians. They inhabited the Earth after preparing it by seeding it with plant and animal life. After about 7,000 years since their arrival, their population increased from 144,000 to 1,008,000,000, end quote. The first part, I believe. Can you provide any evidence to or support the rest? Is this merely your belief? Does everything have to be evidence for you to know it? And what kind of evidence are you talking about? Does it have to be an ancient scripture? Everything cannot come in evidence like that. You have to figure out a lot of things from the God inside you. What good would it be if everything we found out has to come from something physically in front of us? Not only does Malachi Z. York know certain truths, but a lot of other people do too. Is the Caucasian media just saying that something happened any more evidence than when it comes from a brother that presents hardcore facts hardly anyone else's?
The brother answered your question very well, but I'll go even further. There are many among our people whose idea of good scholarly research is to absorb many things they get from white people of the past and present, while ignoring or rejecting what comes from Black people. Whites are too young to know the truth. They're like little children on a discovery trip and take their discoveries for the actual ancient truth. All, all that they and their ancestors have said about pre-Greek ancient history pertains to events in which our ancestors, not theirs, were the participants. Only the descendants of those ancient participants know what really happened. Whites, on the other hand, only speculate. There will come a time when all people on earth will realize that the only truth is actually that which is known by Black people and none by whites.
Thanks for that response. But as few as it may be, there are some whites in the world that are down for the cause and know the truth. Zachariah Sitchin, for one, has written books on ancient Egypt and Sumeria, the mothership Nibiru, and the ancient Egypt technology, gods and goddesses.
Yes, there are many like him who have discovered part of the truth, but not the whole truth. They fill the rest with a lot of self-serving speculations, so no one still ha- so one still has to be careful and not take everything they say wholesale.
Quote, only the descendants of those ancient participants know what really happened. End quote. May I ask why this is true? Are you suggesting Blacks are more knowledgeable because they are Black?
Only they know what happened because the information was passed to them by their ancestors by means of ancient rituals of initiation. They in turn passed it down the same way, and so on ever since 6,000 years ago. And that is how it came to me. Such information is the only truth there is. The rest, either written or spoken, that comes down to us is full of error. That cannot be held because of the way in which it is brought down, a way that relies mainly on individual memories rather than infallible rituals.
Please inform me, how may such knowledge come to me?
By true desire to have it.
Quote, the mind or consciousness is of two kinds. The first is the unconscious mind. It is simply the memory given to us as a gift by our ancestors. It contains all the life experiences of our lineage of ancestors all the way back to the first God who created our universe. End quote. Part of my learning regarding the subconscious and the subconsciousing. Reasoning is not necessarily conscious in its operations, and that, in fact, a large part of the rational processes of the mind are performed below or above the field of consciousness. The subconscious field of the intellect worked out problems, and then after time passed on, the conscious field of the purpose and passed on to the conscious field of the intellect the solution of the matter. We purpose instructing you in the methods by which this part of the intellect may be set to work for you. Many have stumbled upon bits of this truth for themselves, and in fact, the majority of successful men and men who have attained eminence in any walk of life have made more or less use of this truth, although they seldom understand the reason for it.
The brother went on to quote a long passage of Raja Yoga by Yogi Ramasharaka from the link below.
In the next lesson, we will call your attention to other features and qualities of this great field of minds, showing you how you can put it to work and master it. Remember always that I is the master, and its mastery must always be remembered and asserted over all phases and planes of the mind. Do not be a slave to the subconscious, but be its master.
What is being described in the long quote you posted is nothing other than mental inspiration. Inspiration comes in two different ways, one way for Black people and a different way for non-Blacks. Among Black people, inspiration always comes from your first self, one of the 1,000,000,008,000,000 gods. Among non-Blacks, the source of their inspiration is always their maker, Yahweh, or the Elohim. When Yahweh uses part of his mind this way to guide them, they call it the collective unconscious. The inspiration can come in many different ways, in dreams, concepts, images of ancestors, dead famous people, relatives, etc. But all these images and ideas have Yahweh as their source. Similarly, inspiration among Black people always has the first self as its source. That's how mental inspiration occurs. Non-Blacks, having been created in ignorance, are naturally ignorant of the origin of their inspiration. So they claim that it comes from their subconscious mind. They further make the claim that they can master this subconscious mind. Well, the so-called subconscious mind of non-Blacks is actually the mind of their maker, Yahweh. He is their creator, and they are his creatures. No creature can be the master of his creator. Such a wishful thought is self-delusion born of pride and ignorance. The exercises described in the quote only help to open the person up to higher inspirations, not to be God's master. As for Black people, we do not master our first self. We become the first self in divine unity.
Parents, neighbors, culture, society, siblings, teachers, education, religion, spiritual teachings all have some effect on your subconscious. You'll probably even remember something they've said in past 30 years down the line for no real reason you can think of. It's not the real you, so to speak. It is, however, what defines you and your perception of the world. Its imagery even influences how you react to whatever life throws at you. In fact, subconsciously, we've already decided how to react to life situations based on similar past experiences. The subconscious also doesn't know the differences between good and bad, and it is the source of your thinking, daydreams, and dreams, and whatever you think the most of in your life, your attitudes, beliefs, opinions, etc., is normally derived from whatever imagery you have stored in your subconscious. Whether you developed that imagery yourself or got it from your peers, media, and the rest, doesn't really matter. Bad people or evil people have mostly negative imagery influencing them. So called good people have good imagery to influence them naturally. In my eyes, there's little difference between the two. You can work out why based on what I've said here. The people you share imagery with, or I should say the people who have their subconscious imagery arranged in a similar fashion, or normally the people you get on with the most, i.e., you have an affinity with them. And the ones that don't share your imagery or have it arranged differently than you won't like, or you'll feel repelled by them. It's pretty much that simple. With understanding, it's easy to think differently of all people, whatever their station in life. The soul, or pure consciousness, or self, or whatever people call themselves these days, is just along for the ride because it doesn't know itself. Basically, we could all end up believing anything if we don't know exactly how our own subconscious works. The soul's only option is to follow whatever imagery the subconscious gives it, which in reality is the images we've got from life and other people. And we are the ones who perpetuate that imagery regardless of whatever it is. It's why folks, even up to today, have been saying, know thyself, be careful what you wish for, and we judge ourselves, etc., etc. This subconscious is pretty much our own personal heaven or hell, depending on how we think of it.
I grant that what you say is presently true about the subconscious, but I'll add two more important points that are generally overlooked in this discussion. The subconscious mind, as you have described it, has not always been in the way that you observe it today. This is a very recent phenomenon in comparison to the length of our history on Earth. As a matter of fact, it became this way starting only 50,000 years ago, but more especially so in the last 6,000 years. There was a great change in the human mind 6,000 years ago that is not observable by scientists in their theories of the evolution of the human mind. This change was caused by a great change in our genetic structure, namely our DNA, that I'll discuss at length soon. So today's subconscious mind, which you have analyzed quite accurately, is actually an anomaly. Even today, the subconscious mind, as you described it, is not that way in all people. What causes this phenomenon in most people is the fact that, generally speaking, we exist in a dreamy kind of consciousness. Even in daytime wakefulness, most people are not entirely awake. Their memories are as hazy as those of their night dreams. But there are people in whom such is not the case. There are certain people in my culture that can be said to have total recall. Such people never forget anything they've ever experienced since their conception, beginning right in the womb, as soon as their nervous system could register stimuli. And by total recall, I mean they are able to relive their past experiences exactly as they happened then. Such people are not in that class you described, whose minds and actions are dictated by habits rising up from their repressed memories. They simply do not have any repressed memories. So their actions, decisions, and reactions are genuine and new every moment, being dictated by their willful reaction to present situations, regardless of how they reacted in the past.
DNA has nothing to do with the subconscious mind, period. The conscious mind is another matter.
DNA has everything to do with how memory is preserved. What you call the subconscious memory was at one time conscious memory. After time, it became repressed and thus became subconscious, meaning below conscious. And DNA is part of our nervous system and brain, where memories are preserved.
The soul doesn't enter the body until birth.
The soul is nothing more than a personality. It does not enter the body. It's formed anew, moment by each person. What enters the body is the gift of ancestral memory, or what is commonly called the mind of God. It always enters at conception, not at birth. It preserves and records all the baby's experiences while in the womb and for the rest of his or her life. During certain rituals, it's quite easy for initiates to relive these memories.
When a child is born, they are crying for weeks on end for some because they know what they've come back to.
She cries because the doctor has metal forceps tight around her tender head, pulling hard. Then he grabs her by her tiny ankles and slaps her. No wonder they cry.
You say, quote, there are certain people in my culture that can be said to have total recall, end quote. Again, you have made conscious effort in the past life to become that way now.
Incorrect. This assumes that the mystical concept of reincarnation and karma taught in the East, especially India, is true. It is not. It is a complete fabrication. Every person born is brand new, never having lived before. It's God's way of renewing himself or herself. Only the mind of God, or as it's called, the spirit of God, is eternal in the person. It has no karma and does not take part in the so-called spiritual evolution, which is a fallacy.
Every person is brand new when born. That is true, but only in that particular body. Most of the time, souls have lived before in another time, in another body. The body and brain is brand new, which is why it's hard to remember past lives.
There is a conclusion of words in the English language where people sometimes speak interchangeably of the soul and spirit. Other times they speak of them in such a way that they mean two different things. So it's hard sometimes to know what a person is referring to when they say soul. In ancient times, the human entity was described as being made of three things, namely body, soul, and spirit. I'm using the English words obviously. The ancient words are different. Obviously, the ancient words meant two different things by soul and spirit. Otherwise, if they were the same, then the human entity would be made of two, not three things, either body and soul or body and spirit. But it's clear that we are made of three, not two. The modern language defines them much more clearly. We all know what a body is. We also know what a personality is. Thirdly, we all know what the mind is. Even if we cannot quite define it, we use it and are aware when we use it that we are using the mind, which is a different part of ourselves than the body or personality. Some call the mind consciousness. The reality of these three things, body, personality, and mind, is clear to every normal person. So I'll put it to you that when the ancients spoke of body, soul, and spirit, they meant what we call today body, personality, and mind, or consciousness. In other words, by soul, they meant personality, and by spirit, they meant mind or consciousness. I'll also put it to you that no matter how hard you try, you will not find any other component of the human entity other than these three. Some would suggest that life is a fourth component. Life is not a thing that we are uniquely composed of. Only these three things define our uniqueness as individuals. Life is what unites the three and enables the human entity to live and function on Earth. Now, if body, soul, and spirit mean body, personality, and mind, then where is the soul that lived before? To say the soul lived before is tantamount to saying our personality lived before, which is impossible because our personality is formed directly by our present experiences. We have no experiences when we are conceived. Conception is the starting point for every person, who then accumulates experiences that mold his or her unique soul as something that lived before. Then surely by soul, you must mean spirit or mind. The mind of God, or spirit of God, as others call it, or consciousness of God, is the only eternal part of the human entity. It's the same in every Black person because the 1,000,000,000,8,000,000 gods live in a permanent state of divine unity. To say that you yourself are the exact same person that lived before, when the God incarnated previously, is to diminish your unique individuality. Your ancestor that you designed to be you would also resent the diminishing of himself as a complete unique individual. You are a unique individual who has never lived before. Your experience of the world is totally brand new, uncontaminated by any previous experiences, and so is mine and everyone else. God, who is incarnated in me and you, wanted it that way, and it has to be that way for a simple reason: to experience himself anew. If God brought a personality or soul that has lived before into you, then the newness would surely be contaminated. The reason that compels a loving parent to allow his son to go out into the world and experience it for himself without undue influence from him is the very same reason by which God will have it no other way than to bring new life to the world in the form of a brand new personality. This method makes sure that the rediscovery of God is 100% guaranteed to be a pure new experience. Only in that does he find his whole delight and ecstasy. If you were to form new personalities by mixing them with the souls of dead persons, then this newness and uniqueness would be compromised. And yet, that very same ancient God is incarnated in the new person as his or her guide of conscience. Each person is brought into the world to gain certain experiences. The guide, the first self, leads him or her to them so that the purpose may be fulfilled. At some point, the new person and the eternal self will unite as one, and then, and only then, does the new person know that he or she has lived before, not as a past version of the present personality, but as the original self, the only reincarnator. He or she will then send his or her mind into yet another new person so he or she can live again anew, and again and again. It has been going on since eternity that has no beginning. So each one of the 1,000,000,008,000,000 gods has innumerable personalities. When you experience divine unity, you realize that you are the original God. That's what oneness or unity means. So all the innumerable personalities are your very own personalities as an original God. That's what true reincarnation means.
I was reading your post about how the non-black conscious individual minds go to the same place called heaven where all black people go today, and how those non-blacks can be saved. So are you saying that there are good divine non-blacks, and that after this cycle there will be possibly be white people still living among us? Because we are black people, God can dwell in us, but because white people cannot be lived in, how can they be saved? Are they going to become black in the next cycle? How have white people been led to a sinful existence? I thought they were evil by nature. That that was just who they are. I hope these questions do not appear to be an attack on your knowledge, because that is the furthest from what I'm trying to do. I am just confused and seek understanding. Thank you.
There are no divine non-blacks, and they'll never become divine. Divine means to unite with the original self and attain full godhood. The non-blacks do not have an original self. They have a collective unconscious that was given to them by their maker from part of his mind. And yes, they're evil by nature. They can never become black by their own effort. The only way they can become black is if they intermarry with black people and their descendants do the same until they become black. That will be grafting them back into the black nation. But this they'll never do wholesale. To them, it would mean the end of their race. They're more concerned about the survival of their race than they are about the eternal life, which is possible only in a black body in the physical universe. In the mental universe, the so-called heaven, everlasting life is possible for all races. The primary difference between the physical universe and the mental realms is this: the physical universe is the only place where new beings or new life can be created. In the mental realms, after ascension, it's not possible to create new creations. This distinction is important in order to understand why the non-blacks cannot have everlasting life in the universe, but can have it in the mental realms. The non-blacks are impotent beings. They don't have the ability to create due to the absence of the creative black germ. All creativity resides in the dominant black germ. A human body that is made by removing the black germ survives only on momentum. Everything in creation is given an initial momentum and obeys the law of momentum. A simple exchange of momentum is when you throw a ball. Depending on how hard you throw it, It will only go that far. That is its momentum. Life also has this quality. The gods designed the lives of human beings to have a momentum of 7,000 years. At the end of it, the life force that produced the life momentum must be renewed. If it's not renewed, then the people as a species will perish. To prevent their own self-destruction, Black people put the germ of regeneration inside their own bodies. That is the Black germ. It's the guarantee of self-regeneration. A new generation of Black people is born every 1,000 years in our natural world. Therefore, after 7,000 years, there's a completion and regeneration. Otherwise, the Black nation would perish. The probability of that ever happening has been permanently made zero by the presence of the Black germ, which is called the throne of God in his temple, the body. The ancient Israelites called it the Ark of the Covenant and the Tabernacle of God. It's a guarantee or covenant for eternal life in the physical universe. Now, after the 7,000-year momentum elapses, then the species that cannot self-regenerate can continue to exist in the mental realms. Ascension to the mental realms requires only one condition: self-consciousness. That's the quality by which a person remembers who he or she is and is aware of his or her own existence. This awareness or memory is all that's needed for a person to transport himself or herself into the mental realms after death. So, because the non-Blacks have self-consciousness, they too will ascend to Yahweh's heavens, where Black people also ascend to in this age. But they did not make these heavens. They were made for them by their maker. So their survival in them will depend entirely on Yahweh. Yahweh made the races for a reason, which is this. First and foremost, they were made to manifest the evil in God. Secondly, they were made so God could experience the absence of perfection. You may wonder, why would God want to manifest evil and to experience non-perfection? Well, aren't all things contained in God? God is fearless. He or she will experience all that is in him or her, whatever it is. Fortunately, it so happens, as I already stated, that all things are given a set amount of momentum when they are made. The momentum of evil is 6,000 years. Because the absence of the Black germ of the races, they don't have the power of self-regeneration or renewal. Self-renewal. Their 6,000-year time span of evil has now run its course. After 1,000 more years, they'll completely perish, and there'll be only Black people on the earth. But the non-Blacks, those who so choose, will continue to live forever in Yahweh's heavens, because the second reason for their creation continues. That reason, as I stated, is God's desire to experience what it's like to seek absolute perfection and never find it. God has always been absolutely perfect, but every one of his qualities has its opposite, and all the opposites must be experienced also. God is afraid of nothing. The only way for him or her to experience the opposites is to make beings that can manifest them. In the case of the absence of perfection, which starts as evil or self-forgetfulness, the non-Black races are the necessary vehicles to bring the experience. Evil itself can only be manifested in the physical universe. It depends on the concept of time, which does not exist in the mental realms. Over there is no time delay between error and correction, or between sin and punishment. The wages of sin there are paid almost immediately after the sin is committed. So evil cannot exist for long there, because sinners would quickly self-destruct. The physical universe is the only ideal place for it, but the mental realms are ideal for manifesting the second purpose. So the non-Blacks who choose salvation will live forever in Yahweh's heavens and provide God with the experience he or she intended to have. Although the non-Blacks are independent, self-conscious beings with free will, their lives are nonetheless in their maker. In him they live, move, and have their being. All their experiences are his property, as ours are the property of our real self. We incarnated on earth for that, and we will unite with and become the first self. Non-Blacks live for Yahweh. They cannot unite with him and his soulmate in the Elohim, but He is conscious in them as their collective unconsciousness, and all their experiences belong to him. In a similar way, you yourself have creatures that you created long ago for a particular reason. They exist now, even in your heavens, and will continue to exist forever, providing God, your first self, with the experiences for which they were created. Such is the case with Yahweh's creatures, the non-Blacks. They will cease to exist on earth because they refused to be grafted back, but they'll continue to live in heaven forever through the benevolence of their Maker in his mind.